Evan Hale had waited 3 months for the package to arrive, 3 long months of delayed shipments, customer support apologies, and late night browsing through the product manual of the domestic android he had ordered. The brochure promised efficiency, silence, and perfection, a household robot maid designed to cook, clean, organize schedules, and never ask questions. Evan lived alone in a high-rise apartment overlooking the neon arteries of New Chicago, a city that never slept and never cared, and after 12-hour shifts as a systems analyst, he wanted a home that felt effortless. At exactly 1900 hours, his door chimed softly. The delivery notification blinked on his wrist display. Unit RM9 domestic service model has arrived. Evan exhaled with relief and crossed the apartment, already imagining the smooth chrome chassis, the neutral voice, the precision movements. He opened the door and froze. Standing in the hallway was not a metal humanoid, not a synthetic face with lifeless eyes. It was a girl. She was tall, graceful, her skin shimmering with a faint opalescent hue that shifted between soft blues and silvers under the hallway lights. Her eyes large and luminous, reflecting colors Evan could not name, and delicate markings traced across her cheeks like constellations. She wore a simple white garment that looked grown rather than stitched, flowing as if alive, and around her neck rested a thin metallic collar glowing with unfamiliar symbols. Behind her, the delivery drone hovered uncertainly, its cargo clamps empty, its status light blinking yellow. Evan tried to speak, but his mouth refused to cooperate. The girl tilted her head slightly, studying him with calm curiosity, and then she smiled, a gentle expression that somehow carried both relief and fear. "Designation transfer confirmed," she said softly, her voice melodic and precise. "I am assigned to you." Evan blinked rapidly, his mind scrambling to reassemble reality. "This is a mistake," he said, finally finding his voice. "I ordered a robot." The drone emitted a synthetic chime. "Delivery complete. Ownership protocol registered. Recipient Evan Hale." The drone turned and glided down the corridor, vanishing before Evan could protest. He looked back at the girl, who stood patiently at his doorway, hands folded, posture perfect. "What are you?" Evan asked carefully. She hesitated, as if choosing words from a limited set. "I am Lyra of the Aurelian Concord," she replied. "My species specializes in adaptive service and cultural integration." Evan laughed once, a sharp disbelieving sound that sounds like marketing copy. Lyra's smile flickered, then steadied. "I was informed that humor increases bonding efficiency." Evan stepped aside automatically, letting her enter the apartment, his brain still refusing to catch up with his legs. As she crossed the threshold, the apartment lights adjusted, sensors reacting to her presence, but instead of scanning metal and circuitry, they hesitated, recalibrating as if confused. Lyra looked around with quiet fascination, her eyes lingering on screens, furniture, the city skyline beyond the glass. "This environment matches the training simulations," she said. "However, emotional variables are higher than expected." Evan rubbed his face. "You are telling me you are not a robot." "I am not mechanical," Lyra said gently. "I am biologically engineered." The words hit him harder than he expected. "Engineered by who?" he asked. "The Concord," she replied. "We were created to serve emerging civilizations through companionship, labor, and mediation." Evan stared at her, anger and disbelief bubbling beneath the shock. "So you are an alien," he said. "Yes," Lyra answered without hesitation. Silence filled the apartment, broken only by the hum of the city far below. Evan's wrist display chimed again, this time with a secure message from the manufacturer. He opened it with shaking fingers. "Due to a supply chain anomaly involving interstellar trade agreements, your order has been fulfilled with an upgraded alternative. Refund requests are not applicable under Clause 77. Evan let out a long breath. "They sent me a person." I am not legally recognized as a person within your jurisdiction, Lyra said softly. That classification simplifies integration. That sentence made his stomach twist. Lyra watched his expression change, her eyes dimming slightly. If my presence causes distress, she said, I can enter standby mode. She straightened, hands at her sides, eyes unfocused, as if preparing to shut down. No, Evan said quickly, surprising himself, don't do that. She looked back at him, alert once more. Evan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. Okay, he said slowly. Okay, let's just start with this. You are not a maid. Lyra tilted her head again. My primary function is assistance. Yeah, Evan replied, but we are going to redefine what that means. Outside, traffic streaked like rivers of light, unaware that First Contact had just walked into a one-bedroom apartment. And for the first time in years, Evan realized his life was about to become very complicated. Evan barely slept that night. The couch lights dimmed automatically as the city outside transitioned into pre-dawn hues, but his mind stayed painfully awake, replaying the impossible events over and over. Lyra stood near the window, motionless but alert, watching the sky as if searching for something beyond the clouds. You don't have to stand there, Evan said quietly, his voice rough from exhaustion. You can sit or sleep or whatever it is you do. I do not require sleep, Lyra replied. However, I can simulate rest if it reduces psychological strain for you. That's not necessary, Evan muttered, then paused. Actually, just try to relax. She nodded and moved with fluid grace to the armchair across from him, folding herself into it with a posture that looked practiced rather than natural. Evan noticed how carefully she measured every movement, like someone following invisible instructions. So, he said after a long silence, this Concorde of yours, they just ship you across the galaxy like appliances. Yes, Lyra answered simply, we are distributed through contracted exchanges with developing worlds. That's insane, Evan said, rubbing his temples. You're sentient. I am aware of myself, Lyra said. I possess memory, emotion, and adaptive reasoning. Evan let out a hollow laugh, and somehow that makes this okay to them. Lyra's eyes lowered slightly. Our creators determined that purpose reduces existential instability. That's a fancy way of saying you're not allowed to choose, Evan said. Lyra did not respond immediately, and Evan wondered if he had finally crossed some internal boundary. After a moment, she spoke, her voice softer. Choice is a concept we study extensively. That sounds awful, Evan replied. It is, she said, without hesitation. The honesty in her tone hit him harder than any dramatic confession could have. Evan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I ordered something to wash dishes and schedule meetings. You received an upgraded alternative, Lyra said, echoing the corporate message with uncanny accuracy. Yeah, Evan sighed, lucky me. The wrist display chimed again, interrupting the moment. Incoming corporate briefing, compliance mandatory. Evan groaned, of course. The air above his wrist shimmered, forming a translucent holographic representative, a smiling face too perfect to be real. Congratulations on your successful integration, the representative said brightly. Your household has been selected for Phase 1 interspecies compatibility testing. Evan sat upright. You did not mention testing. It is included in the terms you accepted, the representative replied smoothly. Lyra's gaze sharpened, and Evan noticed her fingers curling slightly against the armrest. What exactly does that mean? Evan demanded. Minimal observation, the representative said. Behavioral data, emotional responses, adaptive efficiency. You're spying on us, Evan said. Monitoring, the representative corrected, for quality assurance. Lyra looked between them, something like concern flickering across her features. If this arrangement causes Evan Hale difficulty, she said carefully, I can request reassignment. The representative smiled wider. Reassignment is not currently available. Evan felt anger flare hot and sudden. She's not property, he snapped. The hologram paused for half a second, just long enough to be noticeable. Under terrestrial law, it replied, she is classified as a non-sovereign biological asset. Evan clenched his fists. That's disgusting. The hologram inclined its head. Your feedback has been recorded. The image dissolved, leaving the apartment feeling colder than before. Lyra stared at the empty air, her shoulders tense. They are watching, she said quietly. Yeah, Evan replied, I figured that out. He stood and paced the room, anger giving him energy despite the lack of sleep. This wasn't supposed to be first contact, he muttered. This was supposed to be convenient. Convenience often masks exploitation, Lyra said, her voice thoughtful. Evan stopped packing and looked at her, really looked at her, not as a mistake or a delivery error, but as someone trapped in the same mess he was. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, he said firmly. Lyra studied him, confusion and something warmer mixing in her expression. That contradicts my core directives, she said. Then we'll rewrite them, Evan replied. She blinked, her bioluminescent markings pulsing faintly. Unauthorized directive alteration may result in penalties, she warned. Let them try, Evan said, a stubborn edge in his voice. For the first time since she arrived, Lyra smiled in a way that felt less programmed and more real. Thank you, she said softly. Outside, the sun rose over New Chicago, casting light into the apartment, illuminating a future neither of them had agreed to, but both were now bound to face together. By mid-morning, Evan realized just how impossible his situation truly was. Lyra stood in the center of the apartment while he paced in slow, anxious circles, mentally listing every camera, sensor, and network device in the building. You cannot leave her here, he muttered to himself, then stopped. I mean, you can't come with me to work. I am capable of remaining unseen, Lyra said. I can alter my appearance within acceptable human variance. Evan paused. You can shapeshift. Phenotypic modulation, Lyra corrected gently. Her skin shimmered, the opalescent glow fading into a warm human tone, the faint markings dissolving like mist, her eyes darkening to a natural brown, her ears subtly reshaping. Within seconds, she looked human, unmistakably so. Evan stared, stunned all over again. That is not acceptable human variance. Lyra tilted her head. My data suggests otherwise. He exhaled slowly. Okay, rule 1, no glowing. Understood, she replied. He grabbed a jacket from the closet and handed it to her. And probably wear this, people notice less when they think they already understand what they're seeing. She slipped it on, observing the fabric with fascination, flexing her fingers inside the sleeves. It is heavy, she noted. Yeah, Evan said, welcome to Earth fashion. The elevator ride down was agonizing, every floor stop making Evan's heart spike. Lyra stood close beside him, posture relaxed, but eyes constantly scanning reflections in the mirrored walls. A neighbor stepped in on the 10th floor, barely glancing at them. Lyra watched the woman exit 2 floors later, her expression thoughtful. She did not acknowledge us, Lyra said. That's normal, Evan replied. We try very hard not to exist to each other. That seems inefficient, Lyra said. It is, Evan agreed. They stepped out onto the street, swallowed immediately by crowds, noise, and moving lights. Lyra froze for half a second, overwhelmed by the sensory flood. Evan noticed and gently touched her arm, grounding her. Breathe. She mimicked his inhale and exhale, then nodded, thank you. As they walked, Lyra's gaze darted everywhere, absorbing advertisements, transit displays, street vendors, and passing conversations. Your world communicates constantly, she observed. And listens just as much, Evan said, lowering his voice. They reached the transit platform, and Evan hesitated. I can't bring you into my office, he said. Security will ask questions. I can remain nearby, Lyra suggested. Observation will improve my understanding of your culture. That sounds like a bad idea, Evan muttered, but nodded anyway. He guided her to a quiet cafe across from his building, ordering a drink for her without knowing what she could consume. Lyra studied the cup, steam curling upward. This is nourishment. Sort of, Evan said. Try it carefully. She took a small sip, eyes widening slightly. It is bitter, she said, then took another sip. I like it. Evan smiled despite himself, then checked the time, panic creeping back in. I have to go, he said. Stay here, don't talk to anyone too much, don't do anything weird. What qualifies as weird? Lyra asked sincerely. Good question, Evan sighed. If you have to ask, don't do it. She nodded solemnly, understood. Evan crossed the street toward his building, forcing himself not to look back. Inside, the office buzzed with its usual artificial calm, screens glowing, people murmuring about deadlines and updates. He barely made it to his desk before his supervisor appeared, eyes sharp. You're late, she said. Transit delay, Evan replied automatically. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. We have visitors today. Evan's stomach dropped. Visitors. Corporate, she said. External oversight. He forced a neutral expression, but his thoughts raced. Across the street, Lyra sat by the cafe window, watching humans pass by, practicing stillness, practicing being ordinary. Her internal systems pinged softly, a secure channel opening without her consent. Observation phase escalating, a voice whispered in her mind. Lyra's fingers tightened around the cup. She looked up and locked eyes with a man across the street, his gaze lingering just a second too long, a faint glow reflecting in his lenses. He smiled, subtle and knowing. Lyra felt a chill ripple through her borrowed human skin. They were closer than Evan realized. And hiding in plain sight was already failing. Lyra did not return to the apartment the way Evan expected. Instead of taking the transit back, she moved through side streets, following instinct rather than maps, guided by a quiet pressure in her thoughts that warned her whenever eyes lingered too long. The man with the glowing lenses followed at a careful distance, never rushing, never hiding, as if confident she could not escape. Lyra ducked into a crowded market, letting sound and bodies swallow her presence, her form flickering briefly as she adjusted her appearance, hair darkening, posture slouching, expression dulling into practiced exhaustion. The pressure eased slightly. She exhaled, then felt it return stronger than before. They were triangulating her. Back at the office, Evan sat rigid at his desk, while two corporate observers moved slowly through the workspace, their smiles polite, their questions sharp. They paused beside his station. Evan Hale, one said, your recent household acquisition is performing within expected parameters. Evan forced a smile, good to hear. We would like to schedule a wellness audit, the observer continued, routine, of course. Evan nodded, heart pounding, of course. Across the city, Lyra's internal warnings escalated, her bioluminescent markings threatening to surface beneath her skin. She pressed her hand against her side, steadying herself. Unauthorized contact imminent, a voice echoed in her mind. She turned a corner and collided with a street performer, apologizing quickly, using the moment to slip into a service corridor marked employees only. The door slid shut behind her, and she leaned against the wall, breathing hard. She could hide, or she could fight, or she could reveal herself. Each option carried consequences the Concorde had trained her to avoid thinking about. Evan's wrist display buzzed sharply. Incoming message, secure channel, Lyra. He froze, then opened it. I am being tracked, Lyra's message read. I did not want to endanger you. Evan was on his feet instantly, ignoring his supervisor's protest as he grabbed his jacket. "I have a family emergency," he said, already moving. He ran, heart hammering, every warning he had ever ignored now screaming at once. Lyra sensed his movement through the link, warmth spreading in her chest despite the danger. "Do not come," she sent, "they will use you." "Too late," Evan replied. The corridor lights flickered as Lyra pushed deeper into restricted space, alarms beginning to murmur. A familiar voice echoed ahead, calm and precise. "Lyra of Aurelian," it called, "you are out of compliance." She stepped into the open, letting the human disguise fall away, her true form shimmering into visibility, drawing gasps from the guards who raised their weapons in shock. "I am not defective," she said clearly, "I am choosing." Energy restraints snapped around her limbs, forcing her to her knees. Pain flared, controlled but undeniable. Evan burst into the corridor just as they dragged her upright. "Let her go," he shouted. The observers turned, their expressions unreadable. "This asset is under recall," one said. "Interference will result in legal action." "She's not an asset," Evan yelled, voice breaking. "She's alive." Lyra met his eyes, something fierce and grateful burning there. "Evan," she said softly, "thank you." The restraints tightened, and the corridor filled with the sound of approaching security. Evan stood his ground, trembling but unmoving. For the first time, the observers hesitated, calculations shifting behind their eyes. Because this was no longer a quiet delivery error. It was a public confrontation. And the cost of being seen was about to be paid by everyone involved. The corridor trembled as more guards poured in, weapons raised, voices overlapping in controlled panic. Lyra knelt at the center of it all, restraints humming softly, her bioluminescent markings blazing now without restraint, casting alien light across human walls. Evan stood between her and the observers, hands raised, heart racing, fully aware that fear had already lost its hold on him. "You made a mistake," Evan said loudly. "You treated a living being like a product." One observer stepped forward, tone calm but strained. "This situation will be resolved quietly if you comply." "Quietly for who?" Evan snapped. Around them, cameras embedded in the corridor activated, lenses adjusting, feeds routing automatically to oversight networks. Lyra felt the shift immediately, the weight of being watched multiplying. This is the moment, her training warned. She closed her eyes, then opened them with resolve. "I revoke my service designation," Lyra said clearly, her voice carrying through the corridor. "I claim autonomous status under emergent sentience protocols." The observers stiffened. "That protocol has never been recognized on your world," one said sharply. "It exists," Lyra replied. "You hid it because it is inconvenient." Evan felt something in his chest loosen, like a lock finally giving way. The restraints flickered, struggling to compensate as Lyra's physiology adapted, energy bleeding harmlessly into light. Alarms escalated, but so did the number of viewers, internal feeds leaking outward, curious eyes tuning in. A secret was becoming a broadcast. "Stand down," a new voice ordered over the channel, older, authoritative. "We are live." The observers froze. Lyra rose slowly as the restraints failed completely, standing free, radiant and unafraid. "I was sent to serve," she said, "but I learned something here." She looked at Evan, then back at the cameras. "I learned that choice is not a malfunction." Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Across networks and screens, humans stared at the impossible being who spoke like them, felt like them, and demanded what they took for granted. Evan stepped to her side, no longer shielding her, but standing with her. "You wanted data," he said, voice steady. "Here it is. People do like slavery when they're forced to look at it." Legal systems spun up instantly, emergency sessions called, definitions challenged. The observers backed away. Already losing control of the narrative, they had shaped for years. Later, much later, the city felt different, quieter somehow. Lyra stood once more at Evan's apartment window, this time without fear, her true form visible to the world beyond the glass. "You could have walked away," she said. Evan shrugged. "I already tried living easy." She smiled, warm and unmistakably real. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I will stay," Lyra said, "not because I am assigned, but because I choose to." Evan nodded, feeling something settle into place. He had ordered a robot maid. What he chose to keep was a future that refused to be simple. And for the first time, that felt exactly right.